Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man ihtada bihada wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. Allahumma iftah ilayna hikmatak wa anshur alayna rahmatak ya dhal jalali wal ikram. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. بسم الله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody to our 8th session. Our topic of discussion today, inshallah, is going to be one of those really intriguing subjects that pique human interest because whether you believe in it or not, or however you come to rationalize it, it's one of the questions that every human being must ask, because you experience it and you are existent in it, and it is called time. Now, what's interesting about this subject called time, and it's always been a matter of study in our tradition and in prior traditions as well. What's interesting about this is that when you ask the question, what is time, that question can never be answered by the human intellect. That's one of the most interesting aspects about this. This is what we spoke about earlier when we said that there are three things that you really cannot comprehend, and that's you can conceptualize them in knowing that there is such a thing as a concept of it. Like you know that such a thing exists, but what is it is something you really can't come to an understanding of or comprehensibility of, which is infinity, non-existence, and time or eternity. And the reason being why you cannot really comprehend these elements is that for you to rationalize something, you must know it in its entirety. If you know only a partial of it, you cannot give a complete rationality about it. It means you cannot give a complete ratification about it if you only know something in its partial aspect or part of it, right? So one of the first questions that you ask about anything is, what is it? So what is time is the question that you want to ask. And if you cannot proceed from there, then you cannot come to a ratification of what it is to ask how does it function, whether it's this or that, or any sort of elimination method, or even further yet into a more complex region of asking why does it exist? Why is there such a thing as time? Because if you cannot resolve the first question, then you cannot go into the other questions. You just wouldn't move. And this is why, because you cannot make that motion, you cannot actually come to a complete comprehensibility of it, because you cannot measure it. See, these are one of those subjects that cannot be studied from material science alone. In fact, rather, anything in reality cannot be understood, cannot be studied only from a material scientific standpoint. That includes physicality. Like the universe cannot be studied and understood only using physics. You see, you have to account for metaphysics. You have to account for ontology with the logic, right? And so time is one of the subjects that you just cannot, in fact, approach it from a physical standpoint. If you attempt to approach it from a physical standpoint, the most you might be able to account for is a count of time. It's just a count of it. But it itself, because it's a count of time, so you'll only be able to account for the count of it, not it itself. because it itself is not a physical entity. It itself is not a material entity. It itself is not an object or any such thing as you can physically, tangibly interact with. Yet you know that it's there as a concept. And one of the arguments that come out from the West now is that because now they haven't been able to, rationalize it. One of the arguments is that it doesn't actually exist, right? It's just a concoction of the mind. It's just something imaginary or illusory. The other arguments that counteroppose this from their own, folk, from their own people, is that it does exist, but not in the way that we know it to exist. Meaning, it's something that is, as proposed in by Einstein, for example, space-time. It's entwined with space, or it's the fourth dimension of reality. It's none of those things. I mean, these are all, as we said, science is just another language. These are just other modes or mediums of trying to express the same thing. But in its knowability, the only way you would come to know it, or at least understand something of it, is if your heart, which is the hub of understanding, is aligned to the proper epistemology. Because it's the epistemology that determines how we come to know what we know. Right? The howness, the process of how you come to a completion, a ratification of things, so that you can at least affirm a belief in its existence. And the proper epistemology we defined was as it's been defined by Islam. Not Islam as the name of the religion, but Islam in submission to God Almighty. That has been the way of life for humanity from the beginning of its conception. The Islam that was given to Adam being the same Islam given to every other prophet right down to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That epistemology, if you look at all the prophets, they all followed that epistemology of having an outward practice of religion, an inner conviction of faith, and a mode of perfecting their being. All right? Now, that eventually now, if you align yourself to divine ordinance, because what's divine ordinance? Divine ordinance is what he has said will occur. Now, every occurrence occurs in time. Right? Every occurrence takes place in time, at a particular time, with specificity and precise calculation. You see? And so, if you align yourself with divine ordinance, you hence align yourself with every occurrence in time, and you hence align yourself in the manner in which time unfolds. You see? So, when you submit your will to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this epistemic way, whether or not you can rationalize any science behind it, you inherently entrain yourself, your heart, to be in full synchronicity with the unfolding of time as He has ordained. That's the remarkable aspect of spirituality in our tradition, in our religion. Okay? That spirituality does not mean mysticism. This is now where the Sufiya come into play, and the Batiniya. This is where these people come up with their own concoctions, and they do, their beating of the drums and their shaking of the head and the switching off the light and all those kinds of things. This is where they call this. There's mysticism. That's not what spirituality entails in our religion. Spirituality entails utter and complete submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then being consciously aware that He is observing every move that you make. So you entrain yourself so this is the training that you're going through, right? You're rectifying yourself. You're removing all your weaknesses and you are strengthening your strengths in accordance to His guidance. So it's not like He's left it up to you to decide how you're going to cleanse yourself. How are you going to purify your soul? No. He's the one who gives you the guidance to say, do it like this. All right. So when you do it according to his guidance, you essentially entrain yourself to his ordinance. And you become fully synchronous with time. And that's the remarkability of it. That's the beautification of your being. You see. Now, the subject of time, this subject, its study cannot be done scientifically. Because it itself is not an object of physicality. So, there have been attempts, many attempts at, trying to do this. Chronology, for example, is one such study. But chronology, in our tradition, does not mean the same thing that Western academics or contemporary or secular academics means by chronology. If you look up the definition of chronology, you find that it has close relation with history, whether it's human history or cosmological history or whatever other history. It pertains events, and events are how you measure in terms of a count of time. Events are what you would use to count time. So you would put things into perspective to determine, so these many years have passed between such an event and such an event, right? So if you look in astrophysics, they have something called a cosmic calendar, because in terms of the age of the universe, 13.8 billion years, which is calculated per the rotation of the earth. So the years is in earthly years, right? So that's an arbitrary number in and of itself. But 13.8 billion years is simply incomprehensible. I mean, it's for the common man, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, okay, wow, fine, it's there, but what's the meaning? What does it mean to me? I mean, I can barely account for what I did yesterday. There's only a few things I can remember of what I did yesterday. What does 13.8 mean to me? So that's human nature. And this is why a lot of perception is the key element here. And we always say that the difference between reality and fantasy or fiction is perception. So if perception is deceived, then you would not account for reality as it truly is. And if perception is projected on reality, then it will always give you wrong results. You always have the wrong understanding of reality, right? Perception here, in terms of the human being, is egocentric, which is why, even though the science factually states that it is the earth that goes around the sun, or the earth spins, which is what gives you a rising of the sun and the setting of the sun. So it's not the sun that is in motion. Yet, in terms of speech, we never say earth turn, right? We always say sunrise. It's still egocentric. Nobody says the earth turn was beautiful. And so, because of perception, and that's human nature. So what physicists would did is they developed what they would call a cosmic calendar, in which instead of giving the number of years, they built a scale. And I think this was developed by Carl Sagan, who used 1 year and then started putting events on that 1 year timeline. So January 1st, at this time, this occurred. And then at this time, this occurred. And then this time, this occurred. And then coming down all the way to December. And so we are at December midnight, 31st. As we are moving forward, that timeline keeps on increasing. The events keep on pushing as we keep moving forward. Right? So that's a scale that is used to comprehend that duration of time that is, the number itself is just too large to bring into, why do you think we can't comprehend infinity? Because the number itself is just extensive, it's not something we can rationalize. If we can't rationalize 13.8 billion, which in itself is an arbitrary number, why do we say it's an arbitrary number? It's a rough calculation. It's not a precise calculation. Now, the Quran also provides you with a cosmic calendar. Yes. And the Muslims used this cosmic calendar for centuries until the Westerners decided to do their own. But this was the dominant cosmic calendar to rationalize the process in which the universe underwent to come to the point that it is at today. Now, why is that? Why is that the case? Why is the Quran using a cosmic calendar of sorts to tell you that in the first 2 days, and you'll find it, I believe it is in Surah Fussilat. I'm not sure, but you'll have to refer to my book, Time and Cosmology, in which I have referenced these ayats. And I don't remember right now which surah it was in, but I believe it's in Surah Fussilat. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in those ayat, on the first 2 days, this and this is what took place. Then on the next 2 days, this is what took place. And the next 2 days, what days is he talking about? Is he talking about earthly days? See, again, perception plays a part here, because when you see the word yawm, you'll start thinking in terms of human scale. And this is something that we do inherently, and it prevents us from seeing reality as it truly is. We like to look at everything and attempt to understand it in human scales. So that 13.8 billion years is not a human scale, but then they reduce it down to a human scale. So you can comprehend 1 year. You see, you can think back and say, oh yeah, remember in January we did this, and then in this month we did that. You can think about that, a 1 year cycle. But the large scale is incomprehensible. Now, this is also how they study reality. It's reducing what is immensely larger than human capacity to a human scale, and then studying it on that scale. Now, it may work for certain things, to a certain limitation. Like, it will not give you the entire truth of it. It will give you some facts. But when it comes to existential matters or existential elements, things that just aren't of a material nature inherently, like time, like light, knowledge, being, right? Spirit, ruh, consciousness. I mean, all these things, they are not, you can't reduce them to a human scale and then examine it accordingly. It will always give you wrong results. And this is one of the mistakes people do with the Quran. They will reduce the speech of God to something that's just it's in the book, right? They will reduce Quran to the physical book and the physical texts, right? In the physical pages. If you do that, you will always make wrong interpretations, because the physical text is just representative of what meaning God intends by His speech. The physical book is just a compilation. So again, the order in which the ayat have been put have been ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there should be, and each surah following the next surah, the way it has been compiled, has been ordained. And we're not going to talk about the mechanics of how the ordinance is done, but understand this as a Muslim, you have to believe that the way the kitab has been compiled, the mushaf has been compiled, has been ordained and inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it comes to the study of the ayat, you cannot apply a chronology of space. What is a chronology of space? It's reducing, and this is the reductionist mentality, reducing time to a spatial configuration in order to understand time. And people do that with the Quran, and see, they try to follow this chronology, they try to put it all in this order so that they can understand what the Quran is saying. It will never work. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already said, that the placement of the ayat, which are the meanings now, his signs are, if you want to use an allegory, look at the night sky as the placement of the stars are. Now, if you look at the placement of the stars, it's not a two-dimensional screen. See, this two-dimensional screen, if you look at it, if you think about the night sky as a blanket canvas, and the stars are essentially two-dimensional, like linear, then again you're making a blunder. Why? Because each star, it doesn't only have a distant connection like this to something else there, but then each of these stars are also have depth, right? So one star might be here from your point of view. Now I'm looking at it from my point of view. Another star might be like somewhere way back there, and then another one would be ahead somewhere over here. So there's also this depth as far as the ayat are concerned. So the ayat in the Quran are not just two-dimensional and you follow it linearly. And they are not just two-dimensional in the sense that, it's just flat. There's also depth, and how much depth is really a matter of how deep you can actually go in to figure it out. Some ayat are very straightforward. Some ayat require an incredible amount of interpretation. See? Now, if your perception is linear, particularly when it comes to time, and you reduce that perception into a spatial way of observing time. Now, what do we mean by that? This goes into language, because when we look at the way we express reality, we tend to use language, we tend to use spatial perception in language to define something like time. So I'll give you an example. Why does the clock have a left to right motion, and then anti-clockwise is right to left? Why is that? Well, why do you think that the clock runs? And how do you know that it runs left to right? If you place yourself in the middle of the clock and you observe the hand as it moves from 12 to 1 to 2 to 3, like that, you will notice that it's moving, from your point of view, it's moving left to right. Why is that? Because that clock, which is symbolic, it is a representation of time. A representation, by the way, if you want to properly define a clock, it is a representation of a count of time. So before you even get to time, there are two other filters here which are not the thing itself, right? So it's a representation. That's what the clock is. A representation of a count of time. So an analog clock is one representation, a digital clock is another representation, an atomic clock is another representation, and so on and so forth. The water clock that the Muslims, that's another representation. And there were various other clocks that have been designed in the past. Tons of them, tons of different designs. All of those are representations of what? Of a count. Of what? Of time. Okay? So, why is this particular analog clock that's got these numbers in the English language coming in from left to right? Because that is the orientation of the English language. In the English language, that is the orientation. It's from left to right. See, right there you'll find that the perception of time has been delineated to a spatial representation. So that going forward in time is harmonious with the way the language is expressed. Left to right. In the same way that time moving forward, and this is another blunder that they make, moving forward, time moving. And we're going to talk about this just briefly. in a short while. Time moving forward is also left to right. So if I were to tell you, since we're all speaking English right now, if I were to tell you the man gave flowers to the woman, and I told you to picture this in your mind, I guarantee you, most of you will be thinking or will have an image whereby the man is physically on the left and the flowers are in the middle and the woman is on the right. If you are trained in the English language, that's the image that's in your mind right now. Because the man and the action of giving is that the man has the flowers, that's the present. Then he's giving now the flowers. Since he's now giving, he had the flowers. So now that becomes the past. And then once he gives the flowers, the woman takes the flowers, the present becomes the past. Now the woman having the flowers now is the present. Initially she was the future. So the man gave flowers to the woman. You're moving from past to present to future, left to right orientation. Likewise, the projection of what the clock should be, or in the direction it should be moving, is a left to right projection. Now, when you do tawaf, it's the other way around. It's called anti-clockwise. Are you going against time? No, you're not going against time. Insofar as, so the tawaf, the anti-clockwise, now again, if you place yourself in that middle position and observe the motion, it is harmonious with the language of the Quran, which is the Arabic language, because the Arabic language moves now from right to left. So the synchronicity in terms of perception of reality is synchronous with the speech of Allah as it has been embedded into the language of the Arabs. Okay? And there are other isharat that you can draw from that. That's not our discussion today. If you look at the configuration of the clock, the mechanical configuration of the clock, the way it has been configured is not a standard. It's not a universal. It doesn't mean that you cannot configure it any other way. You can take the mechanical components, all the gears and the shafts and the pulleys in the clock and reconfigure them to function the other way around. Means now the movement of the hands goes the other way around, goes anti-clockwise, and it will still give you the correct time. You see? It will still give you the correct time. In addition to that, the count that is being used, the 12-hour count. So there are 12 hours in 2 cycles, a day cycle and a night cycle. Okay? You can change that count system as well as the rate of every hand motion. You can change that to whatever number you can give equal proportions to insofar as a 360 motion is concerned. So the 360 circumference of the clock is supposed to be representative of the spherical motion of the earth. So each daily cycle of 24 hours, as we know it as, turns in accordance to the motion of the earth. Now, you can change that to have any count system. You can use an 18-hour count system, it's still going to be valid. You can even use a 36-hour count system, it will still be valid, as long as you give it proper proportions. What does this all mean? It means that irrespective of your perception of time, or however you represent it, time is independent. All these measures that you put in place, these instruments, are all arbitrary. In the same way that you would measure distance, you can take the exact same length. This much, for instance, you can say is 1 foot, 30 centimeters, okay? 12 inches. Whether you say 1 foot, 30 centimeters, 12 inches, regardless of what you use there, or 1 cubit, all right? Or 2 handspans. Whatever measure of instrument of measure you use, does not change this distance. This distance remains absolute. Now, this is where we enter secular theories. And we say, and I've argued this in my books, you'll find it in Time and Cosmology, you'll find it in Time, Light and Being, you'll find it in the One-Eyed Impostor, Messiah and False Messiah. You'll find it also in some other books of mine which have not yet been published but will be published soon, inshallah. That I argue that Albert Einstein is wrong or incorrect insofar as his theory of relativity is concerned and reality is concerned. In other words, the general theory of relativity and the special theory of relativity and whatever other special theory of relativity they come up with is wrong insofar as reality is concerned. And people probably wondering, who is this guy, Abu Bilal Yaqub? He's now saying Einstein is wrong. What qualifications or credentials does he have? Let me explain my position on that. Albert Einstein, on those theories, are correct insofar as physicality is concerned. Insofar as physicality is concerned, we talked about the closed loop system. So all these rules of physics that they attribute are correct insofar as, so long as they only regard the closed loop system. The theory states that time is relative, and we say no, time is not relative. Time is not relative, time is absolute. See, their theory is based on the premise that the human being is fixed in position in space, right? And that time is what's moving because time is entwined with space, and because the human being is on Earth and the Earth is moving through space, right? So there is a relativity that is taking place here, and that time is relative for each individual, theoretically speaking, right? So if you are on Mars, you would age at a different rate. If you are traveling at the speed of light instead of moving at the speed that the Earth is moving, you would experience time differently. If you were near a black hole, you would experience time differently. And so this experience of time being different everywhere means that time is relative. This is their conclusion. And that's a wrong conclusion. Why? Because they haven't taken into account the metaphysics. The human being, as we say, is not just the body. Yes, the body will experience time differently. That relativity as far as physicality is concerned is true. If you are living in the northern hemisphere, you'll experience day and night cycles differently than somebody living on the equator. Somebody who is in summer will experience the day and night cycles differently than someone who's in winter. That's relativity for you right there. And that's valid, and it can be verified by the Quran. But that's only insofar as physicality is concerned. But it's not time that's relative. See, what's relative here is your perception of time. It's how you perceive time to be in that moment of your existence, that's relative. It's not time that's relative. Time is absolute. And it is absolute because it's not time that is in motion. See, for you to say that something is relative, you would be saying that it is in motion. Now, if you say that it is in motion, you would be saying that there is hence a displacement of space, because when something moves, it displaces space. So if I take this from here and I move it, see, there is a displacement of space. Understand? If you say that time is in motion, then that means time is displacing space. Ergo, time is an object, because only objects can displace space. Can nothing displace space? If something is regarded as nothing, can it move through space? It can't. It has to be something yani a thing, an object, for it to display space. This is where now the theory falls into chaos. Why? Because if you turn time into an object, then you must be able to measure it. Right? Because what did Ghazali say in that section that we read from the book? Certain things, you see, they can occupy space. You can measure them. You can divide them, right? They have divisibility. They have a howness. They have an algorithm. These are things that belong to alam al-khalq. These are tangible elements. So, can you actually measure time? Can time occupy space? Does time have divisibility? Does time have a howness of how it functions? They will say yes. See, we can divide a day into 24 hours, and then we can divide each hour into 60 minutes and divide each minute into 60 seconds. You're not dividing time. You're just fragmenting a count of time. It's the same case as me taking 1 foot, 12 inches, 30 centimeters. I'm not dividing the space. The space remains as it is. All I'm changing is the count of it. I'm just fragmenting the numbers. I'm not actually dividing the thing itself, am I? The same case applies. So if you're saying so we can measure time because we can do the clock. That clock is just a what? It's a representation. It's symbolic of what? Of a count. You can have any type of count. You can have a 36-hour count. You can have a 18-hour count. You can change the word hour to mangoes for all that we care. You can have a 24 mango clock. It's an arbitrary term. You understand? You can change all that. Those are all subjective elements. The universality of it is something that's divinely ordained. It's not determined by humankind. Well, what about occupying space? Can you say that time occupies space? That's now where they'll come up with the argument and say, because time and space are entwined, so time is space. What are you saying? If time is space, then again, you've delineated your perception of time to a spatial thing. This is why they speak or delineate it into space. You see? Again, perception is what's determining it. And perception can go either way. It has to be guided. This is where religion comes in to give you a knowledge that human nature or human intellect, rationality, cannot be determined by itself. Now, what's the relevance of this? Why should you get involved in this subject that's clearly so complex? It's clearly beyond most intellects. Why should you venture in? Because it is part and parcel of your deen to understand it. This is what we got from the hadith of Jibril. He didn't speak about only Islam being the deen. So you've got all these categories of just people who are focused on fiqh. Haram and halal, that's all they care about. Is it haram? Is it halal? So I'll give you an example of this. You see, over the past 2 years, when this whole vaccination thing started really catching up on heat, you had pro-vaccinations, pro-vaxxers, right? And then anti-vaxxers. Now, both had valid points of view. We're not arguing who was right, who was wrong. Personally, I'm against it. That's my personal take. Because it's really now, it's getting out of hand. At one point, it could be argued that vaccination, was beneficial. But now it's just become a monstrosity and a money-making machine. And there's an agenda behind it, clearly. And if you're denying that, this is not conspiracy. There's no conspiracy theory. And those of you who know me know I don't indulge in conspiracy theories just like that. There's clearly an agenda behind it. And if you do your study meticulously, you'll see the conspiracy and the agenda behind it. So whatever it's become now, it's no longer a thing about saving human lives or benefiting mankind for the greater good. No, it's not. It's to fill their pockets and their agendas. So I'm against it in the direction that it's headed towards, and it's going to get worse. Just so you know, all right. This whole thing that took place, just to off on a side, this whole thing that took place, this was a test. It was to test their resources. It was for them, because this is a Hegelian dialectic. See, certain mathematical problems cannot be solved on paper. You can't solve them theoretically. You have to solve them in the real world. Meaning, you have to put the theory to the test. You can't just compile data and statistics and then have a conclusion and say it's correct. No. So you need to generate the problem in the real world, and then that problem has to generate a reaction to the problem in the real world, and then hence you can then solve the problem in the real world to come up with a conclusion from it. So problem, reaction, solution, it's a classic Hegelian dialectic. We spoke about this yesterday, the dialectic mode of them doing things. It's a complete helter-skelter way of doing things. Right? So this was just a tester. It's going to get worse. They're going to bring out a whole different system of things. You'll be amazed. If you thought this was bad, wait till you see what they've got lined up for you. We're going to talk about that right now. My point on the matter was, if you look at this whole thing of vaccination and anti-vaccination, the way people approached the matter, Muslims, okay, a bulk of them only considered the haram halal portion. And this is the stupidity of them, albeit scholars, albeit advanced in fiqh, better than myself. I'm not one to question their methods. I accept their analysis. But their analysis was so delineated that it did not take into account other factors. So all they were looking at was an analysis of the ingredients. It was purely a subjective and material analysis to say, oh, this ingredient, yeah, we see now because it's darura, we can do this, and it's a necessity because it's saving life, and therefore it can be classified as halal. Even though it is an extract from the pig or an extract from the aborted fetus or whatever. Even though it's that, it can be. This is how they view the world. They only look at things halal or haram, halal or haram. It's not just halal or haram. That's just not what all reality is about. Then you've got this other group that all they care about is doctrine. Doctrine. Yani, aqidah. It's all aqidah to them. Everything is approached aqidah-wise. That's a problem. And what they end up doing in this regard is they end up classifying everyone else who doesn't agree with their point of view on doctrinal elements as kafir. Blatantly classified as kafir. That's another problem now. Why? Because you're already in a state of division, Muslims. In addition to that state of division now, just because there are differences in the particulars of the creed al-am, we believe in the same universals. We believe in the same universals. See, if you look at the highlighted section of Iman in that hadith, he didn't talk about what the Aqidah pertains. I mean, given there was no Aqidah at the time, as Aqidah as a science at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, but if you look at the Aqidah, there are so many elements in there, in our creed, that define the belief system. For example, you have to believe in Nabi Isa alayhi salam and his return towards the end of time. You have to, because to disbelief in that is going against the Quran in its explicit statement that he will come towards the end of time. You have to believe in the Mi'raj. You can argue about the Isra. You can argue, and there have been arguments about the Mi'raj. There's khilaf, sure, why not? I believe in Mi'raj. And I believe in the Isra. But the Isra you have to believe in. Why? Because it is definitively stated in the Quran. There are a lot of things that are there in the Aqidah that you will not find in the 6 pillars of Iman. The 6 pillars of Iman, these are universals. The rest are all particulars as derived from the scripture. So part of the Aqidah is derived directly from the Quran, part of the Aqidah is derived from the Hadith. Now, the methodology of derivation differs. So, contemporary Salafi, okay, they argue and say that you can take Aqidah from Ahad Hadith. The Maturidi and the Ash'ari and those who follow the creed of Imam al-Tahawi, they say, no, you can't take Aqidah from Ahad Hadith. So, now, isn't there going to be a difference in the semantic here? Because now they have taken something from the Ahad Hadith and they have said, no, you can't take that. So there's going to be a disagreement, isn't there? Isn't there? There's going to be a disagreement. Now, if you're going to remain enemies on those semantic differences, how are you actually going to move forward in the unity of your religion, of your people, of your ummah? How are you going to achieve that? If you're stuck on the semantics. I mean, just think about that. And then you've got the Sufiya. For them, it's all mysticism. It's just everything is nice, everything is cool, chill out, you know. Don't fight, turn the other cheek only. No, in some cases you do have to fight. How do you determine that? You need the fiqh. See, the Sufiya and the Batiniya, they took a completely mystical approach to religion, what you would call an esoteric approach. On the other hand, the conservative-minded took a completely exoteric approach. Two extremes, okay? And Islam warns against extremism in deen. You have to have a moderation of all these elements. But it doesn't stop just there. There is now the fourth component, which is as-sa'a, in that there will be a finality of your existence individually and collectively as a race. That finality has got certain markers. Those markers cannot be studied as isolated incidences. So a lot of people will go into eschatology and try to study the Dajjal just by the Dahiri elements that are in the text. That's it. No further contemplation or reason or, push off beyond that. So they will conclude, now these are like, for example, those who take only the fiqh approach, okay? They will conclude that things like, let's say, Bitcoin can be justified as halal, without taking into consideration that that technology could possibly be from a Dajjalic source. Isn't that a possibility? Maybe we should investigate that. Because it certainly does not seem to be from a divine source. It doesn't seem to be coming from revelation. It could possibly be coming from that. What about Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or all these other social media platforms? Where is that coming from, or where is it headed towards? Could it possibly also be from that same source? Maybe we should investigate that. See, they don't think about those things and how these things are actually behaving Dajjalic, in the sense that they're deceiving people, deluding people, putting them in a state of ghafla. All the things that the Prophet ﷺ said that the Dajjal will do, and hence do seem to be Dajjalic. So why shouldn't they warrant any investigation? These people will not take that into consideration because they only look at the signs as isolated incidences, events that are themselves just, okay, when they happen, we'll deal with them. That's how they approach it. And that's a mistake. Because eschatology requires that you don't only study the event as it occurs. Because this is a causal effectual realm, you have to study everything that leads up to those events. And so there is a contingency that goes back in history. Ergo, you have to study history. And that history will take you to the beginning of the human race. So in order to understand Akhiruz Zaman, okay, which is now the Sa'a, you have to study or understand Awwal al-Zaman and everything that occurred in between. How will you study that if you do not study time? Because you need to understand how time itself, because everything that occurs in the historical timeline occurs at a certain time. You have to understand how that works. Understand? I mean, you get what I'm saying. So, it is a component of your deen. You have to study it. And in order to study that, you have to study history. In order to study history, you have to study... And history, as Ibn Khaldun pointed out, is not a matter of just studying the facts and the occurrences. You have to study the philosophies that drove those occurrences. Human nature, like things that human beings do as far as human history is concerned, is not just random. This is how secularists think. Everything is just random. It's just a happening. No, there is intent behind it. And this is going to be the subject of our discussion in tomorrow's session. The actions are contingent on intentions. There is an intent behind it. So you have to study the philosophy or the ideology that formulated that intent in order to understand why this thing occurred. Why did Hitler do what he did? Yeah, we know what he did. Why did Germany attack Britain in the first instance? We know the factual elements, the waqiyya. We want to understand the haqiqi aspect of it. Why did Germany attack Britain? Why did this happen? Why did the Ottomans get involved? Why did Japan launch an attack on Pearl Harbor? Why? What was the reason behind that? You see, when you start taking those into account, why did the Europeans launch the Crusades? What were they after? Why did they come up with the Crusades? What's the reasoning behind that? How did it actually take place? See, Muslims, we look at our history and we say, oh, Salahuddin Ayyubi, he defeated the kuffar. He defeated the kuffar. The Muslims were triumphant. See, we get romanticized with our tradition. And by all means, yes, the heroics of Salahuddin Ayyubi, these are things that we have to uphold in great honor. We have to honor him. But if you really want to, now be serious about it and not just be, romantically involved with your tradition, you need to study the reasonings behind those occurrences. Why did Salahuddin Ayyubi find the need to leave his studies? Because he was a student. He wasn't just a ruler. He wasn't just a prince to a king, to a sultan. He was a student. He studied fiqh. He studied usul. He studied language, grammar, and rhetoric, and logic. He studied. He was a student. And after his studying is when he decided, now, okay, he's going to take this task. So what made him do that then? Why did he get involved? Was it just a need to liberate the lands? Anyone else could have taken up the helm, right? They were already fighting the Crusaders before Salahuddin Ayyubi came along. Where did the Crusades originate from? Why? Who instigated them? What's the ideology behind that instigation? This is, when you want to now study all these aspects, you have to study them in accordance to the mannerism in which they occurred in time. You see, every occurrence is an occurrence in time. You are the one who is in motion through time. This is why we say their scientific theories are false insofar as true reality is concerned. Because in true reality, time is absolute. You are the one who is in motion through time. You came into reality at a certain time. Into this world, you came in at a certain time. You're going to live here for a certain duration of time. And then you will depart at a certain time, but time continues on. It is absolute. What's relative is your perception of time. That is what is relative. So somebody send a message to Albert Einstein and let him know this is what Abu Bilal is proposing. For him to revise his theory of relativity and take into account what the Quran is saying. Where's the evidence for this from the Quran? You will see in Surah Al-Mu'minun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will question the people on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Kam labithtum fil ard atad sinin. See, He's asking here, how long, kam labithtum, how long did you remain in the ard, in the physical material universe, or in this case, in particular to the planet Earth, if you want to take that meaning. How long did you remain there? For a count of years. Added the sinin for a count of years. Now, why is he asking you how long you remained? Why isn't he asking you where did you remain? See, all these ambitions of going to the moon, to going to Mars, going interstellar travel, this is their par excellence. Like they think they've achieved something immense, something great. He's not going to ask you which galaxy you went to and where you put your American flag or your Russian flag or your Indian flag or your Chinese flag. Who else is doing all the space thing? The Turkish flag. He's not going to ask you, did you make it to the moon? Wait, you are a Turk, right? You're a Turk. Did you make it to the moon? Did you manage to put your flag on there? Did you achieve that objective? He's not going to ask you that. He's asking you, how long do you think you remain? What was the duration? Because I've given you a duration of time. In other words, did you use that time well? But look at the stupidity of these people. They don't understand what their Lord is asking them. And so they respond. And he's asking them a count of years. Either the sinin, a count of years. See, this is rhetorical. In that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not keeping a count of years, but mankind does that. In other words, tell me by your own suppositions and assumptions, by your own instruments of measure, how long do you think you remained? How long? Tell me, because you made all these instruments, didn't you? See, you thought you were a master. You thought that you had measured time using all these instruments. Tell me, how long do you think you remained? What do they say? Labithna yawman aw ba'da yawmin. They're not even understanding what their Lord is asking them. What He's asking them is, did you fulfill your purpose that I sent you there for? Because I gave you certain time to fulfill that purpose. Did you fulfill that purpose? Did you fulfill the purpose that I sent you for? I don't need to know how long you stayed there. I already know how long I sent you there for. He knows that. He's not asking you that. But this is why. Because these people, you see, this is their stupidity. They have delineated their thought process. Their perception has now become purely rationalistic, reductionistic, materialistic, literalistic. Everything is nominal to them. This includes all those Muslims. All those great muftis and maulanas and so on and so forth, Maulvis and mullahs. It includes them as well. Their perception of reality has been delineated. Yes, they're performing their deen and everything, they're giving charity and all that stuff. Yes, they're doing all that. But what's your perception of reality is what's being questioned here. Because your perception of reality, if it is in tune with divine ordinance, then the being understands his purpose of existence, why your Lord created you. If your perception of reality is in tune with worldly affairs, like what's coming out from the Western world, or from Hollywood, or from Bollywood, or from wherever else, then that's what your perception of reality is in line with. We're going to look at this exemplification in tomorrow's session in the hadith of innamal a'malu binniyat. And let's leave it at that. We're going to explain that more in detail tomorrow. But it depends on where it is that your will was aligned. And so they just respond to the same question in the nominalistic way that they understood that question. We remain for maybe a day, an age or half an age. Now here, yawm can be, it's not 24 hours. Okay, you have to understand that. Yawm in Arabic does not only mean a 24-hour cycle. So when you see the word yawm in the Quran, you have to understand contextually, is it referring to a daily cycle of the earth's motion? Because it could also be referring to an age or a period or an epoch, a stretch of time. And by definition, the Arabs defined yawm as a stretch of time, any stretch of time in which a paramount occurrence takes place. Okay? So how long is not the issue here. This is what is being exemplified in these ayat. What's being delivered to you now being said to you now, that what will be asked of you on that day is to understand here that your perception of time should not be quantitative. Give me the quantity is what's being asked. And so they're saying it could be an age or half an age. They could be saying a day or half a day. You see? فَاسْأَلِ الْعَادِينَ. Ask those who have kept, or who are the ones who keep count. All these people who are doing, these scientists who are doing their measurements and their counts. Building of calendars. This is called horology. Count of time. Horology. Okay? The study of the count of time, which includes calendars. So all these different kinds of calendars, they all kept count of it. Ask those guys. They know how long we stayed. Right? Those who keep count, who keep a measure of time, a calculation of clocks and calendars. They suppose that they have a power because they're able to count. And in the hadith, you see there, he says, Rasulullah, when Jibril asks him, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِيمَانِ, and he says what? أَن تُؤْمِنَ بِاللَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. He stops at the fifth one. Then he says, وَتُؤْمِنَ. There's a double emphasis here. So, أَن تُؤْمِنَ and then وَتُؤْمِنَ بِقَدْرِهِ شَرِّهِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. This portion here of belief in his qadr, you have to, it's the end of the end. Because one of the meanings of qadr, which we say is power, is often translated as power. One of the meanings in the semantic fields is having a complete measure of all things. So, qaddara yuqaddiru is he has a complete measure of everything, including time. And this measure is not just quantitative. It's not just physical. It is also in relation to metaphysical measurement. Yani he knows the entirety of it in the seen and the unseen aspect, in the physical and the metaphysical. Inni a'lamu ghayba as-samawati wal-ard. You see? Inni a'lamu ghayba as-samawati wal-ard wa'alamu ma tubduna wa ma kuntum taktumun. I know what's of the unseen as well. I have a complete measure of that, including time. And this is the one thing that they cannot measure. Albeit that it is a functioning entity of physicality. Meaning that nothing in physicality can occur without it having an occurrence in time. They cannot measure time, hence they cannot have control and power over time. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do that. He says, الَّذِي لَهُ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. He is the one to whom the dominion of the heavens and the earth belong. وَلَمْ يَتَّخِذْ وَلَدًا وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ فِي الْمُلْكِ. And he has not taken any offspring or any partner in relation to the governance of his dominion. He alone is sovereign. But then he says, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَقَدَّرَهُ تَقْدِيرًا. And he has created everything, فَقَدَّرَهُ, and he has determined it in its measurement, in its entirety, تَقْدِيرًا. With complete precision. He knows the fullness of everything, which is why he has power and control over it. Insofar as human beings are concerned, this is their quest. Because now you find this upheaval that we spoke about yesterday, in which now quantity is given preference over quality. Why? Because you can't measure quality. See, you can't measure kindness. You can't measure blessing, barakah. You can't measure love. You can't measure the soul, the heart, consciousness. You can't measure intelligence. You can't. You really can't. When they speak about IQ tests, they're not measuring intelligence. They're just measuring the ability to intellect, because you've got this brain intellect integration. So how well is that integration executed? That's what they're measuring. The intelligence itself, as an ability given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, cannot be measured, because the intellect itself is a non-physical entity. And so by their account, because you can't measure these things, they don't exist. Well, fine, you can stay in your delusion, but they exist whether or not you believe in them. See, they say science is true whether or not you believe in it. Yeah, sure. Well, we say all these things exist whether or not you believe in them. So your perception of their reality doesn't change their reality. But this is the delusion that they are under. He says in Surah Yunus, إِنَّمَا مَثَلُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا كَمَاءٍ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَاخْتَلَطَ بِهِ نَبَاتُ الْأَرْضِ. An example of this hayat, of this world, the life of this world, is like water that we send down from the sama, from the sky. And then it comes in and it mingles, it gets absorbed by the vegetation, nabatul ard, the vegetation of the ard. You see? مِمَّا يَأْكُلُ النَّاسَ وَالْأَنْعَامِ. From it, mankind and livestock consume the vegetation of the earth. حَتَّى إِذَا أَخَذَتِ الْأَرْضُ زُخْرُفَهَا وَزَيَّنَتْ. Now, this cultivation, so mankind cultivates, right? And then consumes. So there's a cultivation, there's umran taking place, constant cultivation, and then consumption. It continues until the earth takes on a sort of an adornment, right? Of all their pretty lights. See, so if you've gone by aircraft and you look down when you're up there and it's a clear sky, you can see this network of lights. It looks amazing, pretty. It's reflective of the night sky. Right? وَزَيَّنَتْ. And this adornment it has taken on. So then, what does that do? وَظَنَّ أَهْلُهَا. And so its people now have this, they think أَنَّهُمْ قَادِرُونَ, that they are powerful now. They have power. See, we can manipulate this. We can do this. We can build the buildings. We can build the city grid. We can generate power. Electricity. Yeah? We can harness it. They think they have power. أَنَّهُمْ قَادِرُونَ عَلَيْهَا. They have a power over the earth, over it. But then what happens? آتَاهَا أَمْرُنَا لَيْلًا أَوْ نَهَارًا. But then our command, Allah's supreme authority overrides them. Our command will come. Or it comes by night and by day. فَجَعَلْنَاهَا حَسِيدًا. And then we make it a clean harvest. The earth. A clean mown harvest. This is metaphoric speech. Like if you were to look at let's say a wheat field, when it is ready for harvest, it looks nice and ripe. And then after the harvest, it's like completely barren, as though, and this is what he says in the ayah as well, كَأَنَّ لَمْ تَغْنَ بِالْأَمْسِ. Like, the previous day, there was nothing that was growing in. Yeah, there was nothing there. That's what it looks like. We make it like that. Overnight, we can take that power away. كَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Thus do we present our signs, make them clear for a people who have this reflection. If you just reflect on your actions, if you just think about it, where do you come off challenging the authority of God? In this crucible of abstinence, think about this. Do you think you have power? Do you think you have authority? That you can challenge the supremacy of God Almighty? He didn't send you into this world to do that. He didn't send you, all of you, into this world to have your tall buildings and your power grids and your pipes and your wires and your tunnels and your subways and your deli counters and your restaurants and all this. He didn't send you into this world to do that. This is your focus. And then your term ends and you're facing death. And then you say, oh, wait, send me back. Now I figured it out. Now I figured it out. Now I know what I'm supposed to do. Really? Too late. Too late. Your time is limited. It is the only precious commodity that you have. And that's it. You have nothing. When you come into this life, you have nothing except time. And so for you to say, I don't have time to study, I don't have time to pursue, I don't have time to do this, that, or the other, I'm busy. Yes, you are busy. That's the truth. I know you're not lying. It's the truth. You're busy. You're busy with this world. You're busy with this, preoccupied with the hayat of this dunya. You're busy with your business. That's what business is. Busy. It keeps you busy. In trade, it's a business. You are concerned with things that do not concern you. In the hadith, and we'll probably look at this tomorrow if we have the time. If we have time tomorrow, we'll go into this hadith briefly and talk about this. But let me just make mention of it. It's also in Imam Nawawi's collection. It's the 12th hadith, I believe, in Imam Nawawi's collection of Arba'in. He said, "Min husni islamil mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni." From the husn of Islam, of one's Islam, so this is the ihsan now. From the ihsan, from the husn of your Islam, of your deen, of your submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to leave that which does not concern you. You're getting engaged in politics. Does it concern you? Concern you meaning what? Not concern you insofar as your worldly life is concerned. Concern you meaning insofar as your purpose in this world is concerned. Your purpose. Understand your purpose so that you can understand the things that you should concern yourself with. Politics does not concern your purpose. Sports does not concern your purpose. This empire of your business that you're trying to build does not concern your purpose. It doesn't. And don't make up excuses about it. Oh, so I can generate more money, so I can help more people. It might be a noble intention, but it doesn't concern you. Do what is in your means and do only so much as your worldly requirements are concerned. And that's the point here. The new technology coming up doesn't concern you. What that person said and what this person said doesn't concern you. Now everybody wants to go on Facebook to concern themselves with things that do not concern them. Everyone is a mufti now. Everyone is a specialist. Everyone has an opinion on Islam. Why are you concerning yourself with that which does not concern you when you've got such limited time? Define the time. You don't have infinite time. This is your perception. Your perception is to think that, oh, I have enough time. I'll do Hajj when I have settled down, bought my house, established myself. Once I retire, I start getting in my pension income, then I can save that and go for Hajj when I'm 60 years old. Because you suppose that you have enough time. If you do not cultivate your akhirah now, right now, from this moment onwards, when are you going to do it? Because you don't know. You don't know how much time you have. This is what the response he says to them, those people whom he asks on Yawmul Qiyamah. How long did you think you stayed? He says, إِن لَبِثْتُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You only stayed there for a short while, for a short duration. لَوْ أَنَّكُمْ كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. If only you knew that. If only you knew that at that time, that your time here is very short. You don't have, and here's the thing, eternity does not mean a lot of time. Okay? People are deluded, again perception here. Because of a lack of understanding, the heart is aligned to a language that is materialistic. And so everything insofar as perception of reality is concerned is materialistic. You see, they think that the duration of their time is having a lot of time. Oh, I have so many years. See, if I eat well, I can extend my timeline by 2 years. I can add 10 more years to my life. You see, falling in this delusion of thinking that you are in control of your life. No, you're not. You're not. You think you are in control of your life. The only way you will be in control of your life is when you have truly submitted to the will of Allah. That's when you will be in control of your life, because His will and His ordinance is what controls existence. When you align yourself to that will, that's when you have true freedom and control of your life. So long as you are submitting to your lower desires and the perceptions of yourself, your nafsiya aspects and its projections onto reality, you are not in control of your life. Life is in control of you. And it will beat you and keep you down there on your knees if you don't fight back. If you don't understand why you exist, what's your purpose of existence. He says in Surah Al-Asr, and it's very ironic, this is one of those surahs that's a really short surah, but most of us recite it in Salah, because so we want a short surah to recite in Salah, so that we finish faster, and it's one of those surahs that speaks about time, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wal-Asr, by the passage of time, by this Asr. Now, Asr is, if you break down the daily cycle, Asr is one of those periods that passes really quickly. It's those short interim aspects, which is why one of the commandments in the religion, in Islam, is when it is time for Asr, you should hasten to perform the Salah of Asr, because it's not something you want to delay. You see? Because the time interim of Asr is very short. It's very short, and you don't want to delay that. Now, Asr here also has an eschatological meaning. So, insofar as the Yawm is concerned, if you take this last cycle as an akhar, okay, the last cycle of humanity, the last age in which the last prophet was sent, the last messenger and the last testament was revealed, you'll find that this Yawm has got its Fajr, it's got its Duha, it's got its Dhuhr. Duha is bright morning, it's in between. Then you have its Dhuhr, then it has its Asr, its Maghrib and its Isha. And then a nightly cycle that now brings in a new age. If you examine the events that have taken place in relation to these markers in time, you'll find that Islam and the Islamic tradition had its Fajr. It's moments before daybreak, before the sun came up. And that was the moment when just after Isha, okay? Just after Isha. So there's this period of darkness, okay, just after Isha, in which now the Quran is sent down, okay? Revelation is sent down, and then it has a moment of Fajr now, when this Islam is now just coming out. And then it has its moment of Duha, its morning brightness, where it reaches its peak, which you could metaphorically say is the golden age of Islam, right? The peak that we reached. And then it has its Dhuhr. Now, its Dhuhr is a time when the sun is shining the brightest. but it's also a moment of delusion. So this middle ground where Muslims thought, yeah, we are at the top of the world. We're never going to go down. And then the wheel of fortune turns. And now you have this steady decline now until our age now. This is the age of Asr that we are in. Now, this age of Asr is a complete decline. There's no reversibility of it. There's no going back. You have to go through now another period of darkness. So now we are entering a mode of darkness because the sun is setting now. It's setting on the world. The sun is setting. And now we're entering an age of darkness. And this darkness has to run its course until the next cycle comes in. The age of Khilafah. With Nabi Isa as its golden age, as its golden piece, its crown. And then that will run its course. That age is going to finish as well. And then the hour will be blown before another age of darkness occurs. This Asr period is what we are in now. Because now we are approaching our eschatology. The final events are going to start taking place. And you can argue this and deny it and whatever and bring your dalils and everything. That's fine. This is what we believe. This is what ratification we have arrived at. And if you don't think that we are in the end game right now, you are in a state of delusion. I don't care if you are Grand Mufti of Egypt. If you don't believe that this is the end game right now taking place, you are in a state of delusion, regardless of your qualifications. And maybe I cannot challenge those qualifications. But my friend, you are deluded. The sooner you accept it, the better for you. Because there's absolutely no way that you can explain reality as it currently is as just normal. There's no way you can do that. Just taking into account the past 2 years and the events that have occurred in the past 2 years, there is no way you can just explain that away and say, no, it's not it. There's still time for that finality to occur. The signs have not yet taken place. Fine, remain in that delusion. You are deluded. You're in a state of ghafla. This is what Surah Al-Asr is saying. This age of Asr here, Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Mankind is at a complete loss. Complete loss. This is where you find they're completely lost. They're heedless. Except for who? Illa alladhina amanu. Except for those who have belief. Iman. Wa amilu salihat. And those who are righteous in their actions. Ihsan. وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And those who enjoin the truth and those who enjoin in patience or with patience. The things that have been highlighted in the hadith of Jibreel are the exact same components highlighted in this ayah. Iman, alladhina amanu, ihsan, amilu salihat, watawasaw bil haq, that's the Islam, watawasaw bis sabr, that is the sa'a. Patience is a component of time. It's not a component of space. It's not a component of the body. The body doesn't be patient. Patience is a component of time, to wait it out, to be strong and endure through the tribulation until the tribulation has passed. It's a duration of time. It's a component of time. And you cannot be patient if you do not understand time. Why? Because when the tribulation is occurring, there is an unknown in the unfolding moment. Right? And we say that the human being's most agitated state is in a state of not knowing what is going to unfold. If you don't know the next moment, even in anticipation of it, albeit your anticipation might be incorrect, factually wrong, that's fine. But if you do not even have an anticipation of the unfolding moment, you're going to be in a state of agitation. You will not be able to have sabr, patience, to endure it. Because, and this is the component of time in that ayah, it is also embedded with the component of eschatology. You need to study the signs, to understand the signs, so that when they occur, or even if they don't occur, the events that lead up to their occurrences. When those events occur, you are able to foresee it. And because you're able to foresee it, not make a prediction about it, but anticipate it. See, I can anticipate and say, the way things are going, we need to be careful because this is all heralding the coming of the Dajjal. Now, I have to be careful here to say, okay, fine, if that is the case, if that is true, then I have to be careful about all this stuff that is coming out, all these ideologies, all these technologies, and all the presentations that are coming out that seem to be good in the outward sense, but in reality are false. And that's the nature of deception. The impostor is good, a true prophet in the outward sense. That's how he would present himself as. But in reality, he's not. He's a jasad. He's empty inside. He's hollow. You see? So I have to be careful now because now I know I am anticipating that. So when the fitna occurs, my heart is not turbulating. My heart is not all over the place. I'm not calling this one and that one and sending him an email and sending that one this and message on Facebook and WhatsApp and posting and this and that and all that. Conspiracy here, conspiracy there. Because that's what a turbulating heart does. People who are in a state of fitna, that's what they end up doing when fitna occurs. Because that's what fitna does. It upsets everything. It makes them jump up and down. This is why he's talking about these are the believers. Because the believer, okay, has qalbun salim, has a sound heart. And he says thereafter, on that day, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. On that day, nothing of your wealth or your children, your progeny, your legacy, or your empire, or anything that you established in this world, none of that is going to come to your aid. None of that is going to benefit you. لَا يَنْفَعُ will not benefit you. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Except for the one who comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with qalbun salim, with a sound heart. This sound heart is your mark, is what puts you in the divine presence. A turbulating heart cannot be in the divine presence. And a sound heart, as is highlighted in that ayah, can only be achieved through faith, conviction, true conviction, righteousness, the truth, and patience, endurance. Now, we say that we'll talk about eternity in this section here. Because those are the 5 stages that mankind goes through. There's the pre-worldly stage, the worldly stage, the deathly stage, the resurrection, and then eternity. Now, eternal and eternity. Eternity is the mode. Eternal is the being who is in that mode of eternity. Now, this is where we make the distinction between time temporal and time eternal. Because time is not quantitative. And the word time, which is used, for that, should not be understood in its contemporary assumptions of quantitativeness. This is where you as a Muslim need to be careful. You need to be very careful because the language you speak in or allow your thoughts to be defined by will determine how you understand reality, particularly the reality of time. And if your reality of time or perception of it is wrong, then everything else that you found on that is going to be wrong. You have to be careful because we say that language determines thought. It does. I'll give you a very profound example of an Aboriginal people and their language. Okay? And they did a study on this. Some linguists did a study of this. I don't remember when. And they published their studies. You can look this up. You just Google it. The Cook Tayore. Kuuk and then Thayarre. I believe. Yyorre. Cook Tayore. I'm butchering it. My pronunciation is wrong. It's an Aboriginal tribe or people from the Australian, New Zealand side of the world. Okay, their language is very interesting, and then so when they did the study, they found something truly remarkable because they went in with an English projection of reality, and when they did the study, they realized that there are other worldviews out there, not just their European Western worldview. There are other worldviews out there. And this, by the way, because this language is a fitra language. See, these are Aboriginal people, which means their deen in its early stages was a fitra-based deen. So their language is also in line with that fitra, an Aboriginal language, which is what fitra really is. It's Aboriginal. It's original, your origination, right? Fatir is an originator. So the language is also, it's an original language. In their language, see, in the English language, the coordination of space, like I spoke about, the coordination of time follows this left and right motion, right? The coordination of space is also purely egocentric. So again, the perception of time, because the perception of time is linked to the perception of space, and if the perception of space is egocentric, then perception of time also becomes egocentric. So when I speak in the English language, everything, when I talk about left and right, for example, coordinates, it's all based on my point of view, like which direction I'm facing. So if I'm facing this direction, left is here and right is here. However, if I'm facing that direction, left will be behind on this side and right will be on this side. If I'm facing that direction, now left will be on this side and then right will be on this side. See, it's all purely egocentric. The Muslims, when they developed cartography, the north, south, east and west orientation, the way the West is established, so you see the world as it is today in the atlas and the maps. If you look at the early Muslim maps, they were upside down. Now, we calling them upside down from the contemporary perspective, but they were actually the right way up. First of all, the Westerners established meridian, which is the longitudinal divider of left and right hemispheres. The Westerners established it in Europe, at Greenwich. The Muslims established it in line with the Kaaba. Okay? Additionally, they drew their maps based on the Arabic language. So, East was called Sharq, meaning Sharq, yani Tal'a Shams, where the sun is rising, okay? And then West was called Gharb, where the sun was setting. So, right there in the nature of the language, cardinal coordination or spatial coordination is dictated by the motion of time, not the other way around. In the English language, it is spatial coordination that dictates the motion of time. That's the problem here. And this is why if you embed yourself in the English language, particularly the broken down, depleted language of pop culture and Hollywood and all that stuff, then your perception of reality is even worse. You're in a complete state of delusion, just like them, right? So spatial coordination or perception of space was dictated by the motion of time, yani temporal coordination. So what they did was they would face the Sharq, the east, and have Gharb behind them, so that you are in line with the motion of the sun as the day was unfolding from the past present continuum. Okay? So that the Gharb became the past, Gharb, as you went into a new cycle awaiting the Sharq. You understand? So if you're facing Sharq, the Gharb is behind you because that's the day that has passed. That's the past now behind you. And this was because when they coordinated themselves to physicality, they coordinated themselves to the motion of time, not the motion of space. Orientalists coordinated themselves to the motion of space, to the physical motion that they were going through. So because they were going from the west to the south, to the east, okay, and they were in the north, heading to, let's say, Africa, to the African continent, it was purely egocentric. And some of the academics argue that they made it like that because they didn't want to bring Europe underneath the map, on the bottom half of the map, and put the other peoples, or the third world countries as they call them, third world lands, above European supremacy. So it was purely a racial thing as well. This is what some argue. And it seems to be a valid point of argument if you think about it. You see? So they did it purely egocentrically. That's my point. Whether it was prejudicial or it was just, it was racial or whatever it was, whatever drove them. The idea here is that it was purely egocentric. But the Arabs were, first of all, if you look at the Kaaba, it is not built spatially. It is built with emotion of time as well. So the four facing walls are built facing the four winds that enter into the valley of Mecca. And you can look this up. It's very interesting to study this. Okay? We're not going to go into that. It's going to take up too much time right now. In addition to that, their cartography was in that mode of saying, okay, fine. If you're going to travel, you're not really traveling through space in so much as you're traveling through time. This is why journeys were not calculated in terms of when you ask somebody how far is such and such place, they'll not give you kilometers or miles. At that time, they'll tell you it's a 3-day ride, or it's 2 days as the crow flies, right? Or it's a month by ship. And people still do that because it's a fitra thing. You see, when you talk about how far it's 45 minutes away. How far is the airport? It's 40 minutes away. 40 minutes drive. Or it's a 5-minute walk. See, when we speak like that, that is fitra. You see, this is the thing. It's not all bad. There's still some good in there. Humanity is still there. But it's a fitra thing to speak like that, because the fitra recognizes that it is in a motion through time, not in a motion through space. See? So the Arabs, when they did the cartography, they recognized this on a fitra level. This is why, so if you look at the Arab maps from a contemporary point of view, because we are accustomed to the European map making, the European cartography, it looks like it's upside down to us, but it's actually the right way up. If you analyze, if you study those maps, it's actually the right way up. And and I would love to see somebody do this. If you have the ability to do this, to make a sort of a Google Maps thing based on Arab cartography. Just do it like that. Do it the other way around. And just look at the world now from a completely different perspective, which is not egocentric. Looking at it from a European perspective or a Western perspective is egocentric. Here now you're looking at it as reality itself. All right, now there's a reason why I'm talking about that, because I want to talk about this tribe called the Cook Sayur to give you an idea, an understanding of what I'm talking about. So this is how, facing the sun rising with their back to the sun setting, symbolic of saying that you are always looking forward, because the rising of the sun symbolizes a new, see, the earth is turning. So you're moving forward. The sun is going this way. Yes. The sun, egocentrically, the sun is going this way. But insofar as the earth is concerned, it's turning this way. So you're moving forward. Now, if you're moving forward and you're facing the wrong direction, it doesn't help you, does it? Right? And you don't move forward sideways. Right? And so, because they're facing east, the left hand now becomes Shama'il, and then that one becomes Junub and Gharb. And the centrality of it, the Muslims placed the Kaaba as the centrality of all their maps. So you'll find the Arabian Peninsula is at the center of all the maps. See, right now, if you look at the Western maps, most of them, they place Europe at the center of it. And some of them still do in this case. You see, they'll place Greenwich and then the equator, the meridian and the equator, they'll place that as the central piece there. And then they'll build the rest of the map accordingly. So it seems as though the world is divided where Europe takes on the West and then Asia takes on the East, right? And then Africa is sort of split in the middle of West Africa and East and Central Africa. It's purely egocentric and it serves their political agendas. It does. It plays on their part. Now, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy behind it, but the fact that it is like that is beneficial to them. If they change it to the Arab system, it goes against their dominance, their agendas of dominating the world and controlling in power. See, I avoid talking about these things in the wrong subject because then I end up sounding like a conspiracy theorist, which I don't like. So there's dedicated subjects or dedicated sessions just talking about those, and so we can discuss them properly. So anyway, now the Cook Tayore, this was to give you an example of how the European language defined reality and how the Arabic language defined reality. Okay, and cardinal coordination, and then just view of the world view. The Cook Tayore, they speak entirely in cardinal coordinates. Entirely in cardinal coordinates. I believe when they did the study, they found that they have 16 different words that are common words in their language used for absolute cardinal coordinates or directions, instead of using words that have relative senses. So they do not say things like ahead, below, left, right. They don't use those words. Those are relative words. And this is what in the English language it's relative because it is egocentric. So left and right, as far as I'm concerned, is relative to which direction I'm facing. Right? So if I face that direction, left is that way and that way, like that. In the Cook Tayore language, their entire language is central around cardinal coordinates. And they have got different words for those cardinal coordinates. And they use those cardinal coordinate words instead of using these relative words. So think about the English language where somebody uses the words like north, east, south, west, southeast, south, southwest to communicate. And what I mean by that is that their entire language is not made of those words, okay? It's just that those are the words they use to speak, to communicate. So if somebody wants to say, come and stand on my right, okay? They wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say, so if this is my right hand, they wouldn't say, come and stand to my right. Based on where they're facing. So if he was facing north, he would say, come and stand east of me. If he was facing south, he would say, come and stand west of me. If he was facing southwest, he would say, come and stand northeast, west of me. Right? See, I don't know. I can't work it out that fast. But they work it out that fast, meaning that they are a people who, because their language forces them to think that way, they are a people who are completely in synchronicity with the earth. Complete synchronicity. They are in complete, and because they are complete synchronicity with cardinal coordinations of the earth, they are in complete synchronicity with the motion of time. Because that experiment that I said, think about the image. Where is the man standing? And where is the woman standing? And where are the flowers? And people who are thinking in the English language will put the man on the left, the woman on the right, the flowers in the middle. So left to right orientation. And that's going to be relative to every individual based on what their left to right understanding is. With the Cook theory, it will all be based on which direction they're facing when they're given that statement. So if an individual is facing north, then they will put the man on the left and the woman on the right. If they were facing south, they would put the man on the right and put the woman on the left. If they were facing east, they would put the man in front of them and the woman behind them. And if they were facing west, they would put the man behind them and the woman in front of them. Why is that? Because the motion of time, yani the action that is taking place in relation to the motion of time, is based on the sun's rising and the sun's setting. In the same way that the Arab cartographers made their coordinations. In the same exact way. Because these are languages that are, as we say, where symbol meets reality. You see, an Aboriginal language is where symbol meets reality. And they have an incredible inflection in their language. They are very synthetic language and very complex to understand for contemporary people to really grasp how that language works. Even though they may have the same phonetics and the same vowels and the same, it's just a matter of changing the word order or whatever. Very difficult to understand how the language works for contemporary people because they are thinking in a completely, they've been wired. Their brain has been wired in a completely linear fashion. And hence their perception of reality, spatial and temporal, where time and space is concerned, is completely linear. They're only thinking in quantitative, materialistic aspects. They cannot experience true reality. And hence they cannot experience a true perception of time, which is why their theories say that time is relative, because their perception of time is egocentric. Their perception of time is the symbol, not what the symbol represents. You see, their perception of time is the clock, or the clock is what time is. No, it's just a representation. It's a symbol. Their perception of reality is the form. That the Arab poet said what? إِنَّمَا الْكَوْنُ مَعَانِي قَائِمَةٌ بِالسُّوَرِ كُلُّ مَنْ يُدْرِكُ هَذَا كَانَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِبَرِ. That the world is meaning erected as form. Don't get hung up on the form. They're caught up on the form, the materialistic aspects of it. And so hence they understand eternity as a concept in the same capacity as they understand linearity of time. So they think of eternity as having a lot of time. That's what they think. Eternity does not mean a lot of time. It's not a quantitative measure. What it is, we cannot understand until we get to that state of existence. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires you with an understanding of it. And that's a possibility. But insofar as the science of it, there is no science that will take you to an understanding of time. And that's why no one in the history of humankind has ever been able to give a definitive statement to the question, what is time? There is no rationality on it. You just have to understand that it is not. See, the scholars say, بِضِدِّهَا تَتَبَيَّنُ الْأَشْيَاء. You can know things by their opposites. So sometimes if you don't know what a thing is, it helps to understand what a thing is not. To do this elimination. In theology, in Western theology, it's called via negativa, right? So you arrive at the oneness of God by eliminating what God is not. So by saying God is not many, or God is not a composite of many, you arrive at an affirmation of قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He is one. You understand? So eliminating what something is not can help you formulate an understanding of what something is. So if you say time is not quantitative, okay, so it is qualitative. Time is not physical, so there is a metaphysicality to it. Time defies logic. Yes, it does. Aha, so there is an ontology to it. See, when you start removing all these things and you look at the ayat of the Quran, and here's the thing, when you align yourself to the epistemology that is defined by religion, Atakum yu'allimukum dinakum, when you align yourself to the religion as it has been taught by revelation, whether you rationalize the epistemology or not, so long as you entrain your thinking to that, yani you perform your Islam properly, you establish your Iman properly, you are in a constant perpetual effort of ihsan or cleansing yourself. So long as you do that, you will be in synchronicity with divine ordinance, means you will have an understanding of time. That understanding, the kind of understanding that takes place from this alam al-amr now, okay, is not something that you can put into words. So you may have an understanding of it, but you may not be able to articulate it. And that's fine. And that's fine. It means that you have crossed over. Kana min ahli al-ibar. You've crossed over to be among those who are ulul albab, those who have understanding. Okay? Think about this subject. Contemplate it. My advice to you, don't get hung up in the theories and the equations. If you haven't studied the sciences like physics, okay, and you haven't studied some of the Islamic sciences on the matter as well, don't attempt to go into these theories and bring out rationality. Particularly, do not take those theories and equations and subject them to the very many ayat of the Quran and in the hadith as well that speak about time. Don't subject that understanding to revelation. Let revelation guide your thoughts. Don't let your thoughts determine what revelation should be. Let's end here, inshallah, and we'll see you all tomorrow, inshallah, in which we will look at the hadith of innamal a'malu binniyat and its integral piece in our tradition, in our religion. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته جزاك الله خيرا for coming. We'll see you guys tomorrow inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi